So thanks for coming, Mr. Nathan Blecharczyk. You are the Airbnb co-founders and Chief Strategy Officer of the enterprise. And I want to ask first, so let me say something about Metrópoli. We are the digital media in Barcelona, and we cover information about Barcelona and also the entire metropolitan area of Barcelona. We are leader as a digital media in Barcelona. So thanks for this interview with Metrópoli. And I want to ask first, so your relationship with Barcelona in the past, in the present, and in the future, and also in Airbnb, so the relations with Airbnb and Barcelona seen as in the context, in the international context.
Yeah, well, first of all, it's great to be speaking with you. And we work with governments closely all around the world. Mm-hmm. And we understand that as a company of our scale, that partnership and getting that right is really important. And if you look at Airbnb today, at our top 200 markets, for example, 80% of them are regulated. And over the last decade, this has been a journey, partnering one by one with major cities, even smaller towns, mm-hmm. To get regulation right. Obviously, in Barcelona, we've had those conversations earlier on, and I think we've had a good partnership. There's been bumps along the way in the earlier days, but really, especially since 2018, we've worked very closely with mm-hmm. the city of Barcelona, for example, sharing data around and implementing the permitting system, and ultimately taking 7,000 listings off the platform at the request of the local government. So we work with governments at all level, cities, even kind of state or province level, depending on the country, and then federal where it is relevant. But we're also at a very important moment in time, mm-hmm. Where the EU Commission is considering European-wide guidelines for how home sharing takes place. And this is a real opportunity. This is something that we've actually said is a good thing since the very beginning, which is to standardize some of the fundamentals of what is needed to regulate home sharing. Fundamental to regulating home sharing anywhere, regardless of the specific rules that you believe in, is having access to the data. We already share with Eurostat data about the number of listings and the number of nights being booked. Airbnb does this, other companies do this. Eurostat aggregates the data, and this gives real insights to policymakers. But this new EU regulation will also allow hosts to register at the country level. Yeah. And so it will apply not just to a single city, but across the entire country, across the entire EU. And what this will fix is making sure that the data is gathered in a way that's very simple for individuals, and also compliant with GDPR, because mm-hmm. privacy is super important. Mm-hmm. And with that foundation in place, then local policies can make sure that they are really focused on rules that are proportionate to the problems that they're trying to solve. Yeah. And so I think this is a great opportunity to further calibrate how regulation works and make it effective by having this building block in place at the EU level. Mm-hmm.
I think you have a study about the host in Spain, and I think that there is a percentage really important. I have 20%, 28% of the hostels in Spain are entrepreneurs, and I think it's remarkable. And 55% of them, they want to use Airbnb to meet people. And I think that this is important to have a point of view and to have a focus about what is Airbnb in the world, no?
Yeah, and it relates back to how Airbnb was founded too, because Airbnb was founded when Joe, Brian, and I, the three co-founders, we were roommates living together. We had quit our jobs to become entrepreneurs, also known as unemployed. And as entrepreneurs and being unemployed, we no longer had money to pay the rent on our apartment. And that then led us to think about renting out space in the apartment, and the idea of Airbnb was born. But said another way is that even for us, Airbnb was the way we paid our bills to support our entrepreneurship. And I've heard stories from so many other entrepreneurs who have told me that the income from home sharing helped them to launch a new business and also to meet people who helped their business, future investors.
Talking about the enterprises and talking about the business.
You know, it's a really special way both to make extra income, but also meet people you wouldn't otherwise meet. And so I think that is a very important role Airbnb plays in the ecosystem of entrepreneurship in tech. And then even outside of tech, I mean, there's so many people who need help paying for their rent, their mortgage, their basic life needs. We survey our hosts. 50% of them say that Airbnb helps them to make ends meet, to pay for their basic living expenses. And many of them also say that they value the connection piece, the psychological kind of empowerment that comes with offering a service that's being valued and meeting people. And I think coming out of the pandemic, that connection is even more important. A lot of people are lonely, and this gives them purpose.
And this message is now by the administrations, because so to meet people, 55%. So it's not, of course, it's obtain a little of money to the hostels, but also to meet people and to get relations with other people around the world.
Yeah, there really are multiple benefits.
Yeah. So do you have any message just now to the mayor of Barcelona, for example, Jaume Collboni? Are you get in touch with him?
Well, we're deeply committed to Barcelona. We have an office here. We've been here for over a decade now with our team. And I think we have a good track record now over the last 6 years in particular, where we've cooperated well and really created a framework by which Airbnb can thrive and the city can have its policies and rules. I do think with the new European regulation, once that comes into effect, that is an opportunity to think about how do we use that system to further enhance the home sharing regulation in Barcelona, because that European regulation is really a building block that streamlines while also increasing accountability and enforceability. And so I think it's a new tool that is relevant to Barcelona and all cities for that matter.
Yeah. So as a part of the solution in the problem of housings in the big cities, Airbnb as a part of the solution, not the problem.
Yes, I think that housing is a big problem for society. There's many drivers of that problem. Airbnb is not a significant driver of that. There's actually a lot of research out there that from third parties that back that up. It's not substantively going to change the housing dynamic, whether there's Airbnb or not.
Yeah.
That being said, we respect the need for rules and regulation, of course. We also think we can be part of the solution because, again, we survey the hosts. 50% of them are saying that they're using the income to make ends meet, to pay their living expenses, to pay their rents. And so that's important. We wouldn't want those people to not be able to pay their rent anymore, right? That would be a bad outcome. So it's about achieving balance and proportionate rules that have guardrails without having unintended consequences. We have to be careful about unintended consequences.
So we wait this European Union regulation, of course, but Airbnb have received a lot of criticism, believing that it influenced the price of housing in large cities. So this regulation can better clarify the responsibility, have you said before, of each person and of the administrations on also the citizens themselves as Airbnb users. What do you think?
Yeah, I think this is again a tool that will be useful for giving everyone confidence that we have the right level of regulation and regulation that is effective. And I hope that can build off of our track record of the last 6 years in particular, where we've been sharing data and we've been at the request of the city removing listings when requested. We've actually removed 7,000 listings in Barcelona based on input from the city government. So I think there's a good track record here of collaborating. And now with this new tool, we can collaborate further on how to make a system that works for everyday people in Barcelona who would value a little extra income. I think the average host in Barcelona makes 4,000 to 5,000 euros a year. Not a lot, but meaningful. And that should be an opportunity that everyone in Barcelona has access to. At the same time, there can be rules to make sure it doesn't get out of hand.
Mm-hmm. One of the measures in the last month is that Airbnb has taken to encourage accommodation outside the city center. In other locations, in 60, 70 kilometers from Barcelona, the distance from Barcelona, or other big cities around the world, in Europe, for example. Is it getting a good response for you? So people want to go to these cities around Barcelona. Maybe for Americans, 100 kilometers is not a big distance comparing with the distance in Europe.
Yeah, if you look at Airbnb in Spain, 7 out of 10 nights are booked in rural or low density towns, not in major urban areas. So 7 out of 10 stays, nights booked, are not in urban areas like Barcelona. They're in low density cities or rural areas. So I think that right there tells a big story about Airbnb really isn't just an urban phenomenon. Most of it's happening outside of the cities. Mm-hmm. Second, there is just a lot of tourism out there, and where do you want those people to stay? If they stay in hotels, most of the hotel infrastructure is very concentrated.
Yeah.
That's what leads to an over-concentration of tourism. And yet Airbnbs are so dispersed, both within a city, meaning in different neighborhoods of that city, but also being outside the city too. And we've done a lot to enhance our product to help people discover places to stay that they might not otherwise consider. I mean, geographically speaking.
Yeah. Because this is an opportunity for this.
I'm from the U.S. and I might not know, what opportunities exist outside of Barcelona or even neighborhoods within Barcelona. We launched something we call Airbnb categories recently, and also Airbnb flexible search. This is where we show people all the coolest places they could be staying nearby that are really, I think, exciting. Mm-hmm. And we show them that without them having to search by destination name. So most travel sites you come and you have to type in Barcelona, right? Now we can show you, really interesting farms to stay at all over Spain, or castles, or whatever it might be, different categories of mm-hmm. interesting accommodation, mm-hmm. and you don't have to type in the place. And we found that customers who use this functionality, they are 18% more likely to stay in a destination outside of the top 50 in the world. So it shows us that we have influence, that our product has the ability to influence people and think twice about where they stay. And so we're successfully distributing tourism through the product, and then also inherently just because we have so many different homes in different locations where hotels don't exist. For example, just this year, Airbnb guests have stayed in over 100,000 different cities and towns all over the world. Many of those cities and towns don't have a single hotel, mm-hmm. right? It wouldn't be possible for tourists to go there. And I think it's a good thing when tourists go there because their spending helps the local economy. They're not just spending on accommodation, they're buying food, they're shopping. This is really a big deal mm-hmm. for communities. Mm-hmm.
So in some aspects, we can say that we have that you want to recover the original spirit of Airbnb, the co-founders, no? You, Brian, and Joe. So they recovered this original spirit to be connected with hosters and not with investors. This is my point of view. What do you think?
Yeah, well, Airbnb has always been about living more like a local and connecting with people. That was the original idea, and it's still what we do today and what we aspire to be in the future as we enhance the product and make it even better. So this is the focus of the company, and you can connect with people and live like a local, and you don't have to be right downtown to do that. You can be in other neighborhoods, you can be in other small towns outside of cities, and do that and have an even more memorable stay.
Because I know this is if could it be beneficial for all parties, for everyone? So if only locals could offer accommodations without the professional investors, or with a few professional investors, is that the underlying problem, do you think, with the mayors around the big cities in the world?
Well, there's different categories of cities and towns, I would say. I mean, there's some traditional kind of vacation markets where people have had second homes, or there's just an industry of vacation rentals where it's been that way since, decades and decades. But if you're talking about places like Barcelona, the big cities, generally their concern is around, professional hosts at larger scale. And so the rules that they have devised try to address that. And I think now with the European regulation, there'll be more effective tools to target that kind of activity without having unintended consequences on small mom and pop type hosts, individual hosts, right? Because you want to target, say, the professionals without necessarily making it more difficult for the individuals. That's a important balance to achieve. And so with the European regulation, all hosts, small or big, will need to register. And registering is part of how you determine who's a business, who's operating at a larger scale, and who's an individual. And once that fundamental data is collected and made available, cities can decision who is approved and who is not approved. And this will just be much more streamlined than today, where cities have tried to address this in more indirect fashion because they lack the tools.
Because there are big difference between cities like Tokyo or Amsterdam, for example. No? So they prefer, in the case of Tokyo, investors, professional investors, and not in Amsterdam. So it depends. I think it's difficult for the enterprise, for Airbnb, and for the mayors too, of course. No?
Yes, but we respect that cities are going to be different, and so we support regulations regardless of where their motivation comes from and what they're focused on. And I think there's a robust tool set now available to enforce these regulations.
I want to ask an open question now about the tourism. I think this is my point of view, that tourism is almost a human need in these days, no? And of course after the pandemic period, no? To get to know other territories, cities, and people. We have said before. To what extent can Airbnb satisfy these needs as a part of the tourism sector?
Yeah, well, I think tourism has been very resilient and stronger than ever coming out of the pandemic. I think pandemic, people were kind of locked up at home, and I think also a bit lonely as a result. And so I think there's a thirst and an enduring desire to travel. And if you look at the last 30, 40, 50 years, you can see the trend, right? It's just, it's more travel.
Yeah.
And I think travel is good for so many reasons, because, creating connection amongst people is how we solve problems and exchange different viewpoints. So I think it is a good thing for the world. It makes the world a smaller place. So that's a good thing. And I think Airbnb plays a special role in that, creating those connections, because when you stay on Airbnb, it's just a lot more intimate. You're staying in someone else's home. It's a personal exchange. Oftentimes you meet the host. The host might give you recommendations to their favorite coffee shop. You're going where local people go. You're being surrounded by local people. You're not surrounded by other tourists when you stay at an Airbnb. And so I think just inherently in the Airbnb model, we're creating more connections between visitors and local people. And that, I think, is fundamental for making the world a smaller place and overcoming the challenges that we face in the future as a society.
Have you a message for the hoteliers, for example, in Barcelona? They are happy because they are good response after the summer, but they are against these kind of platforms like Airbnb. What do you think? What's the message for the hoteliers?
Well, look, I've always focused not on competition, but on growing what we call the pie, right? Growing the opportunity, growing the number of people who can travel and participate. What Airbnb offers and what hotels offers is actually so different. I mean, yes, they're both accommodations, but a home is better for a longer stay. It's better for maybe a family that needs lots of bedrooms. And yet the use case of hotels is not going to go away. Hotels are better for a short stay, for a business stay. I think ultimately it's important to give consumers choice. Let the consumer decide what product best meets their needs. And there's many things that hotels are better at than Airbnb. And vice versa. There are the things that Airbnb are uniquely good at too. And so by offering consumers choice, you ultimately expand the market. You give people more reason to travel and ability to travel. And this is a good thing. And if you look over the last 40, 50 years, there's been more and more travel. So there's going to be no shortage of growth opportunity. And so I think it's totally possible to coexist, and it's the right thing to do for consumers. And I don't think there needs to be any conflict whatsoever.
What's your interest as a citizen when do you go to another city? The first interest as a citizen, only as a citizen.
So when I travel personally, what do I enjoy?
What do you expect in one city? When do you visit?
I mean, like, what do I enjoy doing when I visit a city?
Yeah.
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 Well, I just like first getting a feel of the neighborhood or the city, and the way I like to best do that is going out for a jog or renting a bicycle, because that's a way to cover a lot of ground and get my bearings about, where is there an interesting cafe or interesting park that my kids might like. I have a family. I'm here with my kids, so knowing where the nearby park is always first on the agenda to keep them entertained. But I enjoy being out and about, doing outdoor activities. I went for a jog yesterday up on the road up in the mountains here. I don't know the name of it, but it was such a lovely view of the city. And so these are kind of the ways that I like to get out and explore, and combine my interest in exercise, for example, with also just taking in the beauty of Barcelona or wherever I'm visiting.
And how do you see the technology sector in Barcelona, the entrepreneurs, the kind of enterprises in Barcelona?
I think Barcelona is such an international, vibrant city. You walk around, you hear all kinds of different languages being spoken, and it's such a desirable place to live, and so much culture. Because of the weather, because of the coast, it really feels like a cultural kind of like mixing pot, and an exciting place to build a business.
To live and make business, because I think is a big difference, no? People like Barcelona to live, but maybe not to make business or to organize.
Well, I mean, obviously it's a great place to live, for sure.
Yeah.
And then to make business,
absolutely.
I think now, especially with many people having the ability to work remotely, or just the prevalence of Zoom as a tool that is commonly accepted, it's more possible to choose where you want to live based on what's the best quality of life, as opposed to what industry is present on the ground. So I think now more than ever, the playing field has been flattened in terms of where you have to be in order to participate in industry. But I will say that Airbnb, we acquired a company several years ago from Barcelona, a company called Trip for Real. They were offering experiences that are offered by local people, and they offer those to travelers. And so we acquired that company and incorporated it into our Airbnb experiences offering. And so just an example of the local tech ecosystem, leveraging the fact that Barcelona is such a popular travel destination and has so many interesting things to do. They were able to build that company here. I think that was uniquely well-suited environment for them to build their company. And it rose to the attention of Airbnb, a global company, and we acquired it. And we've had an office in Barcelona since 2012. But when we acquired this company, we incorporated their staff into our office here and grew our presence. So I think it's a great place to be, and it's why we chose it to be our headquarters in Spain.
And a political question, I think it's an open question, but also is a political question. If Airbnb wants to help prevent cities from being drowned by tourism, I have heard about this, with the dispersion of accommodation. So does the responsibility for homelessness lie with the administrations? Have you noticed, have you verified this in the different cities where Airbnb operates? So the responsibility for lying in administrations for this problem.
Well, I think homelessness is a very complicated issue. It's not just about accommodations. It's about,
for example, in New York this summer, no, they are discussed about this.
Yes, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of questions there around mental health and drug addiction, and in New York, refugees crossing the border. I mean, there's a lot of drivers of that. So I think it is actually an issue very different from tourism and even housing. But to the question of over-tourism, if you look at a place like Venice, for example, which is always mentioned as an example of over-tourism, Airbnb is about 4% of accommodations by nights stayed by visitors. So a small piece. If you look at Amsterdam, another city where there's a lot of concern about over-tourism, Airbnb is about 5% of all travelers stay on Airbnb in Amsterdam. So it's a small part of the equation, and I think the opportunity for Airbnb, unique opportunity, is to disperse that tourism over a larger footprint. Because, as I mentioned earlier, hotels are very concentrated, typically in one or two neighborhoods. And yet Airbnb, if you look at where all the listings are, they're much more evenly dispersed across the entire footprint of a city. And so a lot of our guests are staying, not downtown, but in residential neighborhoods. And I think that kind of integration is really valuable, because those same tourists are spending money at the local coffee shop, local restaurant in those neighborhoods, and that's a really important driver of small business in those communities. And so I think it actually enhances the vibrancy while spreading it out in a way that it isn't a nuisance.
And finally, how does Airbnb face the issue with taxes in the past, in the present, and in the future? If you have any plans for change, or for you it's okay, what do you think?
Yeah, well, the most significant taxes are related to the accommodation, the fact that there's all these stays happening on the platform, and so many municipalities have a tourist tax. And historically, the responsibility for collection of that tourist tax has not been on the platform, but on the individual participants. So if you were a hotel, the hotel would pay the tourist tax. But what we learned early on is individuals are not well equipped to know how to pay these taxes. And so we decided as a platform, we were going to create the technical capability to automatically collect and remit these taxes on behalf of individuals, so that it's easy for them, but also easy for governments to collect the taxes. Of course, to use this platform, we have to be given permission by the relevant cities that they ask us to give them the taxes. But hundreds and hundreds of cities have now done that. And to date, we've collected more than $9 billion through this platform and remitted that money directly to cities and municipalities. So I think it's a great example of how we can use tech innovation to capture value that was previously uncapturable, because it was so informal. The platform formalizes all this activity, and it makes it possible to collect the taxes and create the regulation and enforce the regulation, which is so much more powerful than if it happens informally or in the shadow market, in the gray market.
And in the case of the enterprise, so paying the benefits of the Airbnb in every country, in national country, what's the politics in this moment?
So I think you're referring to maybe corporate taxes.
Yeah.
So taxes around the world are very complicated, but of course, like any good corporation, we pay the taxes that are applicable to us. So we're fully compliant with the tax requirements of each country.
So thanks, Mr. Nathan Blecharczyk, and thanks for coming for this interview with Metropoli, and good luck in the next month.
Thanks for the thoughtful questions, and it's a pleasure to be here in Barcelona.
And in the future. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.